chair is here and ready.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Nice and cold out there, isn't it? Oh, man. Get the pipes on the drip tonight. So. Oh, Happy New Year, everybody. Yeah, so what did I miss?
Just an introduction, and we'll be looking over our memo, our plans that Dr. Rich is going to go over with us.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, so again, check out the plans. Dr. Register is going to give us a little bit of intro. Then what we thought we'd do is what we learned last time, maybe have a little bit of batting it around within ourselves and then do the breakout session. So yeah, I'll just I guess, Dr. Register, whenever you're ready, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, everyone. 12 degrees outside in my car and holding right now. So, and we are going to school tomorrow. We have Fred. Where's Fred? Here. Fred's responsible. So what was our attendance percentage today, Fred?
We were actually down just a little. We're down about 10%. We usually run about 7% absent, so it wasn't
Not too bad. So a few thousand stayed home, but that means about 80,000 or so went to school today, and I would think it'd be a mistake to close and keep 80,000 at home. Particularly when the weather's pretty dry. We have our fingers crossed about the buses starting tomorrow, but as Fred says, all of our buses have new batteries because we had to replace them all last year in the cold snap. So the batteries are pretty good. I'll talk just a minute about this, introduce this, and then I do want to say that we've got a number of people here tonight who are involved in developing the specific plans, the district support plans for all of the schools. I do have a printed document of all of the school improvement plans of the district and the district support plans that have been developed for all of the priority schools. We have completed this process now. And so let me talk just a minute about the process and tell you how we got to this, how and why we got to this point, and then we can proceed as you like with breaking into small groups. I expect with people representing or speaking, having a special interest in individual schools that can be a pretty productive conversation. I think we have plenty of people here who can speak directly to each school plan. We essentially can summarize the process that we are taking into 4 steps, and the first of those is to conduct the diagnostic analysis for each school, and a lot of that's based on test scores, but also a lot of it on instructional rounds and faculty meetings and community meetings and other means of gathering data and compiling all of that to really try to create a profile for us to consider for each school, specifically focused on the challenges and how we think we can provide support systems to develop turnaround strategies for these schools. The plans that we've included for each school are best characterized as short-term. What can we do this year to make a difference this year? Now, some of them are longer reaching than that, but we wanted to. We have a school. We have received, since we started these meetings, planning grants for a number of the schools, school improvement grants for a number of these schools, and we're also redirecting some resources to address some of the needs that were identified to us in the community meetings and faculty meetings, and talking to principals in the school and looking at their school improvement plans, but also in our own analysis of what we think can make a difference. And I think these district support plans are best characterized as trying to insert resources into short-term strategies to begin a process of turning around that ties with longer range plans over the next year or so. The third component is for us to do an analysis of the quality of leadership in the schools. Maybe quality is the wrong word, capacity of leadership in the schools. And I've said this before and I'll continue to say it. We can have good principals that don't have the capacity to turn around low-performing schools. That is hard work. We've been about it for 2 years now, and we haven't been successful. We've seen successes, but we haven't been as successful as we want to be. And so this is a doubling down on strategy, if you will. And number one, you got to have a great leader in a school that can drive a turnaround process. And we're well down the road in doing that now and looking at leadership in the schools. And then the second component of that is analyzing quality of instruction. And a part of this process during the first half of the year is to really take a hard look at that. The second part of that is affected by the first part of that, about leadership. So it's quality teachers, quality leaders, and making some decisions in that regard. Leadership first. Do we have the right leaders in place? And then using those leaders and working with those leaders to make sure that we have a staff that has the capacity to significantly improve quality of instruction and performance of children in these schools. And then the final step that we're working on is to really look at empowering the school leaders to develop and implement their own turnaround plans. These district support plans that we've presented aren't perfect. We've already had conversations with principals in some of these schools about ways to improve the quality of these plans. They're not perfect, but because we aren't in those schools. And I've formed my own impressions. I've been in all of these schools and I've walked the halls and talked to leaders and talked to people, but we don't know as much as the people in the schools do. So we want to really work with the school leaders that we identify as the ones that can lead the change in these schools to develop these effective turnaround plans, and then to hold them accountable for where they're going. I will say that there were several common themes that emerged, and you can see that as you read through all of the plans, all 12 plans. You can see those common themes emerge, and there are about 4 of those. And one is not a condemnation of anyone or not a negative comment, but just simply the fact that we have a large number of inexperienced teachers and a high teacher turnover rate in a number of our low-performing schools. That's something to address. To address the fact that we must create stability and have a cadre of teachers who are capable of turning around schools and who are stable in staying there. Second factor that's common and we've seen in a number of places is that within a priority school, in a school that's heavily impacted with low socioeconomic status, many of the challenges that are faced in urban schools, you find climate of low expectations, and that easily happens in a school where all of the children are impacted by socioeconomic status and the other challenges that they have. We have compassionate people working in these buildings, and compassionate people can lower expectations in terms of academic achievement for children to accommodate them, if you will. We can't do that. Every child deserves to be in an environment where they are expected to produce, and then we're expected to provide the services that are needed for them. So that climate of low expectations is something that has to be addressed. Then other school climate issues emerged from place to place, and that's dealing with issues such as disruptive behavior, chronic absenteeism, other impacts of that need to be addressed. And you can see as you look through the different plans some strategies that we've identified to do that. And then finally, and perhaps we should have listed this one first, is a lack of parental engagement and community engagement in schools. And that's one of the things that we're most pleased with initiatives that are going on in this area, is that people are really stepping up and saying, yeah, we want to be engaged. And so we've got to support that. We've got to support that through the schools and through the more effective engagement of parents on a much wider scale and community representatives. So we've completed the analysis. You've seen that, and we're certainly interested in getting some feedback from you on those. And we've completed our district support plans, and I'll say that these are not asks or requests or wishes. These support plans are going to be funded and in place, and we're doing these things. And in fact, a lot of them we're moving on right now. We've already staffed some schools differently, and we've already addressed some of these things. So that's not something that's for another year. That's to happen now. We are next in the process is working immediately with an analysis of leadership in the schools. Do we have the right leaders in place? And as these principals who are here from a couple of the schools can attest, we've already begun those conversations with our principals, and we're not ready to say this principal is going to stay, this principal is not going to stay. That's very personal, and it's a very thoughtful process, but we are going through that process. And for those of you who might not have heard this, all principals in priority schools have to reapply for their jobs. And we're going through that analysis now, and some of those changes will be made sooner and some later, but decisions made about leadership in all schools before the end of this school year. But our goal is to identify and have the leaders in place early enough so that they can make decisions about staffing and about school improvement plans, and not in the summer. We need to do that early so that we have a plan in place by the time school starts. So some schools won't see a change in leadership, and for those that do, we want to identify them early. And if they're coming from some other part of the country or another school or something like that and can't come on board now, we want to contract with them to come and get engaged in the school before the school year, even if they're not taking over until the end of the school year. We don't need to wait till the end. We want the new principals, or we want the leadership in the schools, the principals and the leadership in the schools, to be involved in the school improvement planning process, because we do have new funds coming into the schools that have new school improvement grants. They're 3-year plans, and we're ready to make those now for implementation in the fall. And we want the right leadership team at each school being involved in that planning. So that's pretty much where we are. We are presenting this to the school board, the complete set of plans Tuesday night. This really doesn't require school board action. We'll get some reaction. It was presented at the Teaching and Learning Committee of the board today. It's online now. They have until Tuesday to look at these, and as I said before, we think these are pretty good plans. Can they be modified? The answer is yes, but it's got to be done quickly, because we are putting the resources to these plans to implement these plans now. And so Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, with that, I'll turn it back over to you and we'll proceed as you choose.
Thank you, Dr. Register, and I'm sure we'll have, we can take questions for Dr. Register, but I'd also like to bat around the group too, before we do any kind of breaking out and that sort of thing. It was easier for me to sort of wrap my head around the, larger planning, grade configurations, that kind of thing. I know the committee really wanted to do turnaround strategies, so I'll look to you guys to see what we want to accomplish out of small groups and, how we're going to make our own recommendations and do our work. So, I'm looking for guidance from you guys on that, and you have your hand up first.
I just want to ask Dr. Register, I saw, I think I saw on Twitter where somebody said from the meeting earlier today, there was a discussion about bringing in an outside group to do, and it wasn't clear what exactly. I think it was Andrew Zworsky. So I would just some information on that.
Yeah, good question. We actually have on the board agenda for approval Tuesday night, bringing in a consultant. Mass Insight is the name of the group. They're a Boston-based consulting firm that has been very successful in working with school districts, and it is analyzing the structure and capacity of school districts to lead turnaround. Turnaround doesn't exist school by school. You can't leave every individual school alone to do that, so it does take a system engagement, and we're proposing that Mass Insight do this work for us. We think they're outstanding, and it's a very quick turnaround. That's the nice thing about it. They will have somebody here full-time. It's a process that'll run through March, and it's an analysis of the way we're organized in the school system to support the turnaround strategies in our priority schools. We feel, I wish I'd have brought a handout of that. If I'd anticipated the question, I would. But it's really looking at analyzing us and how we're organized. It's very timely for two reasons. One is because of this work and the fact that we're doing this, and they will get engaged with us as we go about implementing these plans and working with the schools on the plans, but particularly because of the new school improvement grants. For those schools that have already been priority schools, this is the third year, their money's gone this year. We have to analyze for the new school improvement grants the way we're organized in the central office, Dr. Coverstone's office. We're losing funding. We're losing race to the top funding for a number of those positions. So we've got to restructure anyway, and we'll have the expertise from Mass Insight over the next couple of months to do that. They'll have one person, a point person here full time, and a team of people in and out for the next 2.5 months in our district.
Other questions? Jackson?
Yeah, this is part of the question for Dr. Register, part of the group. Dr. Register, for the schools that already that were priority schools in 2011, and this is their third year, this year's TCAP scores are pretty significant for those schools.
Right.
So I guess for the group, and not correct, right? So for the group, I guess I'm wondering if we should think about that in terms of how we prioritize where to put our efforts. I know Bailey could use all the help it could get this year hitting those scores, and that's in here in the action steps, looking at high yield strategies, for Bailey. So I wonder if we should think about that in terms of priority, like who's running out of SIG money this year, and then I'd sort of propose we know the long-term turnaround strategy for Kirkpatrick, so maybe that's sort of at the bottom of the list.
Right.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a good thought, and just to what you added to the group. We can look at the 4 bullet points on page 2. I was making a comment that parent and community engagement efforts may be the 4th bullet, maybe something we can really bat around in our groups, just because we've got parents, we've got community groups. what are some recommendations that we can make? We've seen successful schools, we've seen not so successful schools. That may be something we can really help the district on.
And I've kind of been talking to some individuals, and I've worked in turnaround for a number of years, and I just wanted to kind of put some ideas out there that we can use as a starter point for conversation or discussion. And here in the schools or the parents and teachers that I've talked to just in East Nashville, I've heard a few things, and I'm just going to call them out to you. And hopefully, if you agree, you can say, yes, that's something that we need, and we can check it off and talk about ways to make it work. Or if it's not, say that's not something. But this is what they've been telling me. I've heard they need additional leadership. Each bottom 25% and 5% school needs an assistant principal. The lead principal cannot do discipline, paperwork, school improvement plans, and monitor the entire building. Teacher assistants in as many classrooms as possible in the elementary school. If not by grade level, then by classroom. If we're going to talk about getting people inside the school building, that's where they need to be. A data coach, somebody who's there to analyze data, not one person that works at 5 different schools or 10 different schools, but someone who's clearly, a data coach for these, even if it's a data coach for the bottom 5%. That we know this person personally, they know us, they know our teachers, they know how to discuss this information with our teachers, so we know where to start, so that we can help our students move forward. And that data coach maybe could help with testing, coordination, school applications, school choice applications, maybe have a mobile, data center that during the application period, those particular people can move around to these schools and help parents make these decisions. And maybe even bring possible solutions for improvement, professional development opportunities, strategies for students, software that students maybe could use that are effective in other places. Extended days, that even if 30 minutes is all that we could extend a school day, then that may work. One particular teacher says she gets social study and science in every single day with an enhanced option schedule, which is great because that builds literacy and she's building those students' knowledge base. Effective PLCs for alignment of student standards, making sure that it's not just a grade level meeting, but it's a vertical alignment where you may have teachers in different grade levels meeting together to say, my second graders aren't getting this particular concept. So in first grade, can we make this a stronger idea? Strengthen early learning opportunities. They would like for us to connect with some preschool facilities or daycares that are willing to give students early learning opportunities, just as Ross has given a lot of students this particular year.
We are going to be expanding pre-K.
Yeah, we got a grant for that, and I think that may be an additional idea that they would like to do that. Teachers that are specifically trained to lead other teachers, not just chosen by the administration, but they have specific training in how to be a mentor to leaders. Data collection within East Nashville schools, they aren't sure how it's working within their own school. So I may teach 3rd grade at this school, but I really don't know what my 4th graders are doing. And not state data, but data with, like, I gave a test on Friday, and 40 of the 4th graders didn't do well. That tells us that we may need to do something different. So they're looking for some sort of strategy for working on data within the school, not a holistic view. Cluster standard alignments, I think we're talking about that with lower expectations. They like to see an alignment in standards for the clusters. That principals should be able to have autonomy to do what they need to do on an individual basis within the school, but there'll be a standard across the board for academics, discipline, attendance, social, emotional learning, all of those things. Professional development for teachers, staff, and parents. because parents also need professional development on how to deal with education, and education is like a quick turnover issue itself. 1 minute we're doing one initiative, and the next minute a new initiative comes out, or a new standard or something of that sort. They want to know which community partners are here. I requested a list of the pencil partners, and hopefully we can get that soon, and other community groups that are willing to help our schools that are low performing and need community assistance. And parental involvement, some sort of revised parent involvement system where parents know what to expect from their particular school, and they know how to be involved. They are sure on how to be involved. It won't be from school to school. Like in this school, being involved means just dropping you off on time. And in another school, it means dedicating 30 minutes to, working in a classroom, that there be some sort of system for parental involvement within the clusters.
Yeah, and I think you had it seemed like a handbook on the parental involvement that you had, you created something before that was a whole one-sheeter on parents based on what you've done at Warner. And so one of the things I was thinking was, how do we sort of bring that together? And that was my point on that 4th bullet point. Sort of create a handbook of, this is best practices for getting your parents involved and that sort of thing in your particular school, and what they should do. How do you get them engaged, and what do you have them do? And that kind of goes with that replicating the community PTO kind of idea in some other schools, or even just the Dan Mills PTO that we've had some success with. A couple other comments from your thing, extended days. I know there's a cost there. I am interested in that just from, you guys coming to the council perspective. If we did price out the Chris Henson bottom 5%, bottom 25%, whatever you guys were recommending, is it a half hour, is it an hour? And then what does that look like? Not just for East Nashville, but we would have to do, I guess, countywide, So something that interests me as well, and we can bat these kind of things around the group. Great list, though.
A couple of those things you have, and I guess Dr. Steele and Dr. Williams would be best to speak on it, but the additional leadership that you spoke of, and Dr. Steele already challenged us in the beginning of the year, the middle schools here, as to how are we utilizing our assistant principals that are in our building and how they look and the responsibilities, so that we are freeing up the executive or myself in order to lead instructionally. And because I came from the high school, we already had that in place at Jared Baxter, and I think Graymar does it in Rank, where it follows that SLC model of the high schools, where the assistant principals have more responsibility inside the classes, and they're leading instructionally. So the district has already started in that route already, and also the community partners, because Dr. Steele spoke about that. I want to say last month, I believe, we talked about if you're going to be a partner in the school, you're not just a partner on paper, but you're actually in the schools and working with schools and on the middle school level, if I'm not mistaken, because they already are working with the high school. So some of that, a lot of that, what you said, are already kind of in play.
So I can speak on that. We have actually met with the pencil group and already pulled those list of partners in those priority schools, especially elementary. The middle and high schools are already doing that, as Miriam said, and look at how they're using their partners. Donuts and things like that are nice, but that's not going to raise the instruction capacity in the building. So we've challenged those principals to look at the RTI time, which is 60 minutes, specific time every day that's based on skill deficit, to train those partners. Dr. Garcia is actually working with Pencil to train those partners to come in during that time and actually work in the classroom with the teachers on instruction in small groups based on skill deficit. We feel that will address a lot of more hands in the classroom. It will address instruction and give those partners a meaningful way to engage in the building, besides the good fun stuff of reading to kids and things like that, but it's not going to have that higher impact if we can get them focused on skill deficits.
And I think that's what the teachers and staff members and parents, community members that I talked to, had coffee with over the last few months, is that they are looking for someone because we see a lot of the parents are willing to offer those things like donuts and, coffee and great days, things like that. But we're looking for community partners that are willing to offer literacy improvement or help with those literacy strategies, help with foundational math, because the foundations are key. So you can't have a successful school without strong literacy skills and foundational math. So we're looking for those particular individuals who are willing to partner with us on those levels, even if that means that, and I'm not sure if we do individual partners, like if you are not a company.
No, we need to be individual partners. I mean, like the parents at Warner, that group of parents that wanted to volunteer, and I talked to Jill about this, but didn't know what to do. That RTI time, that 60 minutes every single day, is a perfect time to get more hands in the classroom. I met with Jay, I think it was yesterday, and he's got a church that's willing to come into Inglewood, and that's a perfect place for them to be engaged. It doesn't have to be a company. It can be individuals, it can be a nonprofit, a church, whatever, but they need to focus on instructional partnerships, and the other stuff is fine, but that instructional will help the teachers.
And I think that's what we're looking for.
At Inglewood, we use our partners that are coming in and asking to help in our reading clinic. Yeah. And it's great training, so they can help academically, but they get that training ahead of time, so that it's not just winging it.
Right.
It's good setup.
I'll say, I think there's lots of great things on that list. Not necessarily the coach, but the use of data in kind of continual assessment of progress. I know when Cameron Middle School, not the portion that was Cameron College Prep, but Cameron Middle School, during the phase-in, was very active in using data on a daily, monthly basis, kind of school-wide and individual, down to the child level, to assess who's understanding what I'm learning and who needs remediation, who is ready to move on, so that the teachers in almost real time would know how effective their instruction was. And I mean, they achieved great gains as well in their final years of phase out. So I'm not sure, if it's more of a capacity as far as human capital and needing an additional person in order to be effective, or even if, let's say, we were able to add an additional position of a data coach. I think it is more than just that, putting a body in the building, but it's creating a, what is the word I'm looking for? A culture of, and training teachers in how to use that and making it consistent and applicable throughout the year. So I'm not sure, is that something, like what specifically, I know it was Julie Simone through Lipscomb that kind of helped with that. Was that a partnership that they had at Cameron Middle?
Yeah, it was. Lipscomb added some staff and expertise to helping them do data analysis. We're at an awkward place now with data analysis because of the shift in standards, because of the testing issues that we're going through, changing from one test to another. So we've got a lot of data, and what we really need help for teachers in doing is learning how to analyze the data that we have now. Jay and Fred are involved very much in looking at data analysis, and formative testing is a big deal now. What's the purpose of testing during the middle of the year? We have a lot of teachers who say we test too much. We spend too much time testing. We have others who say the tests that we're using don't really help us make decisions about instruction. And so what we're doing is really looking at how do we test, how do we evaluate, so that we get informed instruction, so that we can give teachers information that they need, so that they can differentiate their instruction based on that data. And that's what, Jay, I
can elaborate just a little bit. The teachers in the room, and maybe even some of the parents, know DEA. DEA was the formative item banks, the formative assessments we've used in the past. It was not aligned with Common Core. So that's kind of that awkward area we're in right now. So we just introduced right after Thanksgiving, or maybe right before Thanksgiving, a new formative item bank called NWEA to all principals. and it is for every grade level in English and math. And so we walked all the principals through how to get into the system and how to pull questions aligned to a standard, so teachers can generate a short formative that they can administer in their classrooms. Now the teachers there are key teachers, the coaches are all being trained in that throughout January, and sessions are open for teachers to come in, teacher leaders, so they can take that back into their buildings. It took a little while to roll that out because we had to purchase it, get it inside SchoolNet, but it is a complete item bank that's aligned to standards that teachers can pull those formative assessments for each standard. The next phase for us, we've developed for next school year a series of common assessments by standard, by grade level that align with our scope and sequences that will be pushed out to schools so we can get a pulse on where the schools are and where they are meeting their targets, so we can have that real-time data that you're speaking about. We've had that with DEA, and now we're just in that gap. We'll have it next year with NWEA.
And if Mr. Amato will speak on it, because we started NWEA like fourth week in August.
Yeah, and then we use
for the
for
districts.
our benchmarks, we use that, our quarterly benchmarks, we also use it weekly for formative assessments, 7 to 10 questions. That's great. The passages are great. The rigor is there. So I love that. And I think, while I'm speaking, I guess the second thing I was thinking about, while we're as a group and what we can do. I think the two things I wrote down. One, as a community, what can we do? I think some sort of event. I think us getting together to do something as a community, I think I'm a big sports fan, so that's where my mind goes immediately. But like a March Madness tournament one weekend where we brought the community together to have a basketball tournament or something at a school or a local community center, do something as a group. So like community-wide, what can we do? And then instructionally, how can we scale things quicker? We're talking about testing, and Jackson brought up testing that's coming with April. Like reaching certain schools. What are I think if we can kind of get, what are the schools doing well? What are certain teachers doing well? What are certain schools doing well? And how can we share those things more quickly? And like even, so I think some of that's exciting. I don't know if that's going to get said tonight in the small group at all, but just like, what can we do to actionable things that would help the community kind of, what is the community event, the family side, and then academically, is there a way to, I don't know if you want to start something to do to actually get that best practices scaled quickly in our schools? Because the plans are cool, but like when you read the plans are fine, but as a teacher, like some of these things get done, some of them don't. Some things are just on paper, there's data and there's numbers everywhere, but like, what are the great schools? What do they have going on in these schools? Like what, and how can we put them at Jerry Baxter if we don't have it already? What's going on in these schools that are going, why are they successful? How can we, if we're not doing those things, how can we start doing them next week or the week after as soon as we can?
I think we do have to make sure that we are honest in our discussions and evaluations. We talk about testing too much, but I remember testing every Friday. I took a test every Friday as a student. And I mean, from elementary school to, I don't know, college or wherever, it was just when I got to college that I was like, oh, we don't take a test every week. So I'm thinking, and I'm going to say this in response to Catherine. Catherine, I think I'm going to say this on my own experience. When I did turn around, we sent a set of teachers from certain priority schools to a data professional development, where they kind of became experts on being the data, they understand how to analyze the data and how to do formative assessments so that we don't end up with just summative assessments. We have smaller common assessments, and I taught high school, so I taught my own students how to create their own data. We had 20 questions, and you missed, 10 of them. What did you get? And they, okay, I made a 50, and that's not proficient because I need to make an 80, and this is how many more I need. And they understood that. And I think even if we don't have a person in that particular position, we can maybe suggest to the district that we have a group of teachers from the bottom 5 or the bottom 25 go to professional development or training that allows them to become the experts in data in their building. So we know that we have these individuals who are willing, because the district can push out, test, formative assessments, common assessments that seem as if they are what the school needs, but the teachers in the school know best what is needed for that particular assessment for that particular week. And that may help if they know that I have this bank to choose from, I understand from our PLC what we were missing, so this is what our test needs to look like, or this is what our reteaching test needs to look like, our remediation. And that may be a possibility where it may not be a new position, but it may be teachers who are willing within the building to be teacher leaders are willing to become data experts within their building.
Yeah, that's the culture she's talking about. And that was more your data coach point, but I had been thinking about your data collection within the school point, and it just made me think about like when I go to KIP or something, I feel like some of them do a good job of, posting data, and there seems to be more of that around. So I don't understand exactly what they're doing or what's going on, but that would be something maybe we want to think about. And what is it that they're doing and implementing, and how do we do that in the other schools?
And I mean, I think to that point, the ability as a teacher, I only taught for 2 years, and so my experience is very limited, but, the ability of a teacher to have control of the data in their own classroom for their own students based on where their students are, that every teacher has to be able to do that. It's not a matter of having a person in the school. I think the way you start is you have people come in and change the culture and say, look, this is part of the job. You have to be able to understand where your students are, what they're hitting, what they're not. And, this is my experience in high school. You take advanced classes and the whole class basically fails a test, and the teacher says, well, I guess we're going to do that unit again because nobody got it. It's that kind of thing, and it's iterative. But it's really got to be a focus on classroom by classroom. This is part of the job, especially at priority schools. So I think having that as the big goal, every single teacher knows how to pull down tests or whatever it is they need to pull down that are aligned to whatever it is they need to do. And they know how to, to Dr. Register's point and everybody else, they understand that the data that they get is actually helpful to their instruction in the classroom. It's not just we're giving a test and it gets whooshed off to the central district somewhere and we just kind of never hear about it again. That's, I'm sure, helpful in a broad sense, but it's not helpful to the teachers on the ground. So I think having that as the goal is important. And then the other comment I had, and I'm going to pass something out. I made copies. I took so who was it? Was it Carrie the first? Yeah. I took her lead. I've been doing a lot of reading and sort of research and sort of broader thinking, and this goes more towards the community engagement, parental engagement side of things, because my thinking on this has been there's a lot of work to do in the schools in terms of leadership, in terms of changing culture, using data better, making sure we get the best teachers. A lot of that is work that, I'm not necessarily going to be directing that. I'm not going to come in and talk about curriculum or whatever. That's not my job. But the job of the community is to be actively involved in each of these schools. And that's where we as a community, me personally for sure, have fallen down up until this point. We've kind of been ignoring these schools, tinkering around the edges. We recognize there's a problem and we sort of help. We don't really go full bore on it. I think to do what we're talking about doing and to really, really turn around these schools and turn around and give the teachers and the students and the families what they need, give them what they deserve, we have to be thinking about big structural things. So you learn lessons from charter schools and magnet schools in terms of autonomy, the ability to decide in the school what's best for those students and what's best, how are we going to teach those. Autonomy over budgeting, and I know that's a huge thing for charters that they appreciate. Autonomy over budgeting, autonomy over curriculum, autonomy over school day, and I know the district is starting to move that direction to some extent with school-based budgeting. What I'm going to hand out, and this is, I would say treat this as planting the seed, and we can talk about this in future. Oh, thank you. This is a white paper came out of Indianapolis, and it's something that pops up around the country in various places, something called local school councils. Chicago was one of the first places to do this systemically, but New York City schools have a version of this. There are places in and around Georgia. I don't think Metro Atlanta does, but Forsyth County does, and a few other places in and around Atlanta. They're pushing hard for it in Indianapolis. There are places kind of dotted in and around the country who use this model, and it is an interesting model in that it really prioritizes parent and community involvement directly in the school. So the model, just to give it to you short, and again, this is a long thing that I just passed out, so we can take this up some other time, but the model is basically you have a local school council at the school that is, I think that Chicago is like 2 parents, a couple of teachers, a student in the in the high school level, you have a student, and I think 1 or 2 community members, because it's kind of similar to this community in a lot of respects. But you have that council at each school, and in Chicago, they actually elect them. I don't know. That's a big challenge, but you actually have that council inside each school, and that council has a significant amount of control over the budgetary process at that school. Not total control, but a significant amount of control over the budgetary process. They have a significant amount of control. In fact, I think in Chicago, they actually approve the contracts of the principals. And they are basically helping run the school and helping direct community involvement in the school. It's a big idea, but I want to put it out there because if there's any place in Nashville that this kind of thing could work, it's in East Nashville. And I think, given what we have here as a group, the recognition that we've had, this shockwave that's gone through East Nashville that has finally shaken us all up, or some of us at least, I think thinking about big ideas like this and really altering the landscape of how we do schooling over in East Nashville is worth talking about. So that's all I'll say about that. I think it's really interesting. There's some really good case studies. I have a whole lot of other research that goes with this, but there's a really nice bibliography that goes with this that talks about all the research about this model and how it increases community engagement and parental engagement and is tied to student achievement increases and those kinds of things. So take a look at it, but my closing thought is I think big ideas are what it's called for.
And John, I think I'm going to just put this out there that Inglewood, when I was going over the school improvement plan that Hank sent us, they had I wrote down grade diverse school improvement team.
Yeah.
They have parents,
Yep.
They have a student, they have representatives from the community, they have leaders, because sometimes some school improvement teams can end up being just like a leadership team and nobody from, the ground is there.
Yep.
And I think that's between this committee and those particular, and I'm using her because she reminds me of Inglewood every time. And examples like Inglewood and how they have developed a school improvement team may work in the idea of moving us toward a more community-based. Because I think we have some of those things in place. We're just not utilizing them the way we should. Like we have that parent advisory committee that some people don't use. And then we have school improvement teams that many parents don't even know that they have an opportunity to be a part of. We have a committee like this. There's, parent involvement teams that could be, developed within the school that could work, at making idea like this become a reality. Maybe not every single part. Not all portions are, available to us or something we can make work. But at least I think we have some foundation, a skeleton to see this happen or something like this, similar to this happen.
And I'll just say one sentence on that. That's actually part of the reason that resonated. Inglewood's, when I was reading their thing, I was like, oh, this actually kind of looks like a baby version of kind of a local school council, like what it would look like and how you could build on that. So that's a great point.
I have a couple
Yeah,
questions
sure.
about this. One obvious question to me is why not trigger charter if we're going down this route? And then the other question is, in the white papers and the stuff that's out there, is there any example of a gentrifying neighborhood like this and how it would affect equity? Because my concern is, and I'm a Lockland parent, right? I'm sure the Lockland parents have a lot of things they'd like to change about that school and probably shrink the GPZ and I just worry that it would that giving parent control to specific schools in an area where property values are shifting and we're getting more and more segregated, that might create like real inequality issues in education in East Nashville.
Well, I think that's why when you look at the model they talk about, there's actually that exact worry, and so that's why they structure it. That's why most of the models are structured so that the parent representation on the thing is a minority representation on the school council. So it's usually at least two to three teachers. In Chicago, I believe it's specifically community members who do not have kids. Mm-hmm. And so it's specifically to bring in voice for folks who are not so narrowly invested in that school. And then there's a parent representation as well. Because I think if we're really serious about getting community involvement, getting community involvement in this kind of way is a serious way to do it. But I take your point. I mean, what you don't want is to have a cadre of folks take over a school and say, we're going to do what's best for our kids, and then screw everyone else. I think that
a lot of political considerations and
sure,
something
but I mean,
that
it's
big,
the same. That's going to be the case. I think that's going to be the case in a lot of governance models. So
either way, don't want to live. That's a big BHAG, big hairy, audacious goal.
Nice.
And but I don't want to lose track of.
That's a throwback. That was good.
We do want to have. We do want to think about how to get more parents and what is our little mini handbook of recommendations that we want to make to implement in each school for the parents, for a great PTO, at least to start. And then, this is definitely another idea that we can throw out there. Do we want to break, or do we want to kind of keep just batting stuff around here? I'm open on that.
I think our conversation is kind of going back and forth. So if you guys would please, with input, tell us how we can discuss these topics in phases so that we make some clear progress on each topic, so we don't move from instruction to community involvement to, clusters and how to transition and move things around.
Do we maybe want to do, rather than groups focused on schools, do we want to do groups focused on topic area? So folks who want to do recommendations focused on instruction or data or whatever, folks who want to do stuff on community involvement.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, we could break into that and
I like it.
Okay.
So we have, if you guys would help us with, I have instruction, or instructional strategies, turnaround strategies, and then community and parent involvement. What other topics are large and we need to, I know we talked, our last meeting was about alignment and making sure that our pathways and feeders are what we want them to be, or what's desirable and what parents would buy into. So that would be another idea, feeders, pathways.
Well,
would it be fair to say instruction is sort of expectations, standards, and data? We're not going to be providing curriculum suggestions.
Well, I think what we mean here, I want to make sure that we understand that we don't get mixed up on the jargon. When we say standards, we mean expectations, not standards as in Common Core standards or literacy standards, not that type of standard. Not like a curriculum standard, but an expectation standard of what's the expectation for all of our schools, even if we broke it down into what's the expectations for students, what's the expectations for teachers, or, leaders, and what's the expectations for parents. Not standards as in, RI, 12. Not those type of standards, not based on particular content area or knowledge, but standards as an expectation. If that makes sense.
Even just the two categories of instruction and parent, I think I counted 14 of us, that's two groups of 7. I don't know how much smaller we need to get, and that, if it's broad, we can talk about.
We're going to wait on the whole next meeting, just so you know the future is going back to the pathways and that stuff. We're going to have Chris back. just so you know, and then we'll jump back to this the next meeting. So yeah, I think let's just go ahead and break out, and yeah, we do.
One other commonly mentioned set of issues is wraparound services, social services, those kinds of things that we need to provide in these schools. So that could be a third component or part of one of those.
So more of the academics, the community involvement, and then the social services. Is that what we're saying? Okay. Let's go ahead and break so we can, just kind of brainstorm for about 20 minutes.
You want to do that? Go to this corner, go to that corner?
Yeah, we'll go, I guess we're still going to be in the back. So we'll just, we'll say.
You're not modeling good behavior.
So
I know, I'm sorry. I should have had this plan.
we have 3 groups: social services, and then wraparound, and then we have parent and community involvement group, and academics that includes expectations, and turnaround strategies.
Community service, you can go to the back first.
How about wraparound services come over here?
Yeah, stay up here for wraparound. That's good. We have this whole side of the room. We might as well not kick everybody out of their seats.
Community involvement is back right corner.
Just a quick report. As soon as our academic people come back. We'll, if you can just hit the highlights, one person from each group of kind of what we talked about, and then we'll get to wrapping up for the night. You guys want to go first? Wraparound services?
We were identifying different wraparound services that were needed in the schools, family engagement, extended learning, different health pieces as far as physical, dental, and mental health, after-school tutoring and mentoring, early child development, and nutrition programs, summer programs to prevent summer learning loss, and adult education. And then Tony came over and was talking to us about some of the things, the pieces that they are putting forth with from the district level. I was very excited to hear about Community Achieves pushing into all of the bottom 5 and the pieces that go along with that. STARS, I think you call them STARS counselors, is that what you call them? Students taking a right stand, and those people will be able to hook up those community pieces with the school and what their specific needs are. But somebody identified at each school. I did have one more question. Can I ask that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Those pieces that you're talking about, will those include the traditional side of Kirkpatrick as well?
The traditional side of Kirkpatrick?
Yes, because they've got the lower levels that will go charter.
Yes, we are actually still continuing support services even through the phased conversion. So Kirkpatrick is still going to receive additional services as well. Now, with them doing a phased conversion, I cannot guarantee they will fully implement the community schools model, but the other grades do have the opportunity to assist.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do you want to do, Jackson, are you doing your group or?
So we had instruction, and we had 4 takeaways. The first was that, Dr. Steele was in our table, training all the teachers in the high priority schools with the NWA, the assessment tool that we're using, and getting that training started in the schools, so that's good. Using Lexile trackers for students to set goals, and helping the teachers and the students set those goals and meet those goals. Having visits to charter or other high-performing schools to view high-performing instructional strategies and supports. And finally, the last one is to pair highly performing teachers with teachers of need as mentors.
Great, thank you. And then finally, whoever was going.
So our discussion about community involvement was a fairly broad one, and then we sort of went in a couple of different directions. But I think the baseline thing we all agreed was that it's similar to what we talked about in the larger group, is that there needs to be a level of transparency about what's happening in our schools and the opportunities in our schools to be involved. And where the schools are and who's at them that we haven't had thus far. We have the group of us around this table, we're all, education junkies. We're teachers or principals, or we're just, follow education very closely, or we're parents or whatever. We all know what's going on. But the guy who lives over on, Douglas, who doesn't have kids in any school, has no idea, probably, what's going on. And that's a big barrier. And so the idea would be, how do we turn schools into something that is a basic part of the fabric of East Nashville? So when you think about East Nashville, if you live out in West Nashville somewhere and you think about East Nashville, you don't just think about, there's Lockland Table and there's 5 Points and then there's, Holland House and then there's whatever. But you also think, and there's Warner Elementary, because I know about that school because they do this. And, people know about Lockland, but they don't know about the other schools. And that's even within our own community. And so we talked with Tony about the community chiefs model, implementing really strong community and parent engagement, similar to this local school council thing. And then talked a lot about how you sort of raise the profile of the school and make it a welcoming place and make it a place where parents have traditions. You have the annual carnival that every year you're going to have that, or you have the annual rivalry game. Every year you're going to have that, and that's something you can look forward to, and that's something the community can look forward to. And you can, I think, begin by bringing people into those kinds of things. It'd be a welcoming place, and that's part of the solution. The other part of the solution is what we talked about before, which is getting community members in a really substantive, I'm going to have an effect on what's happening in this school way. So that's where directing those volunteers towards actual substantive volunteering is a big part of that. And figuring out, Tony was telling us how we're trying to bring everything under one umbrella so that if I want to volunteer at a school, I don't go, well, do I talk to Pencil, or do I talk to Hands on Nashville, or am I supposed to call the principal, or do I need to talk to one of the parents, or do I go through the PTO? It needs to be a very clear way that you can be involved in the school. Some people, I know Jackson, and your wife is working at Kirkpatrick, so she sort of beat the odds. She was able to beat down the door enough to get in and be helpful. But we need to make that an easy thing for people. And then the last idea, this is something I read about in another city, and I can't remember if it's Phoenix or Chicago or something, but it was a school in a strongly Latino community, and they did a lot of thinking about what the opportunities in that community were. What resources did they have? And they realized that one of the resources they had in that community was they had a lot of grandmothers who were very involved in raising families and very involved in the community, and they identified that as a resource and said, how do we use that? And so what happened in that community is they built a program where these grandmothers would become classroom aides, and it would be a regularly scheduled, not just drop in when you feel like it, but they were scheduled to come in and work with specific classes, and they actually got a stipend. And so they were paid, and I don't remember exactly how the funding structure worked, if it was a independent outside funding or if it was some sort of match by the district, which is something we could talk about. But it was a for real, you're getting actual community members in the classroom doing real substantive work, and it's valuable work because they're getting a stipend, which goes back into the community and helps those same families. And so I would challenge us as a group and as members of the community, when we're going back and we're leaving, to think about what opportunities do we have out there. Are there groups like that? When I've been in Casey Homes knocking on doors and stuff, there are grandmothers there. And in fact, there's a group of Casey Homes women who have their own sort of group already. That could potentially be an opportunity over there. And maybe you could mobilize, you start small and then build it out. Get them in working in Warner or get them working in Kirkpatrick. Thinking along those lines about not only do we open the doors to the larger community, but really targeted specific ways to get people in the doors substantively.
Thank you. I think your leg of this three-legged stool is something we can continue to focus on and have probably the most impact on as this group is this community engagement thing.
This is a question more than anything. With the new rollout, or the rollout of the new MNPS websites, there is a form that can be created by individuals within the school, survey type thing. And we just put together, the PTO just put together one for volunteers. And I wonder if, one of the things we talked about in our group was the confusion that potential volunteers have about going to a portal here or a portal there or a portal wherever to figure out what to do and how to do it. And if potentially MNPS could standardize a volunteer form, I mean, because ours came up, it was just on the fly. It's like, well, I know Inglewood needs these kind of things and gives the potential volunteer the opportunity to pick and choose, put in their contact information, put in their special skills if they have any, or if they want to identify any, and considering the multitude of ways that people have found to do that, if that could be a standardized form for the website, for all each school has a volunteer form page, because everybody uses them. Everybody uses the volunteers. I mean, if Aiken PTO is putting out requests for volunteers, then anybody's going to use volunteers. And that was just something that we did recently that made me think this could be a standardized function, just one sheet on the MNPS Laughlin website.
Like when I was last year as a coming in kindergarten parent, I was like, I want to get involved. I'm like, yay, I'm excited. What can I do? But it was clear, like I mentioned, I want to get involved. One teacher's like, I need you Wednesdays, 8 o'clock, come in, read with the kids. Like she had Rebecca Welch, she had a specific thing to do that was easy. I knew it wasn't complicated. That as a school culture, huh?
I'm in the TL out here.
Oh, so yeah. So it's, teachers who have something like specific. This is what I need you to do. Or in the office when somebody comes in. It just needs to be that welcoming culture and make it as streamlined as possible.
Right. And having each school, because people are going to go to their school's website before they go to any Hands on Nashville website, then that would be a quick way for those incoming parents
And let me just say also, but some of those things will need also extra support at the school level. So like even the website, like our website isn't updated because we don't have the staff and time to get it updated in new form. Coming up with those procedures and things. So it's just something to think about, because I think we would all love to have more volunteers, but there is a management aspect of that. And we need trained volunteers, and that's what we were talking about before. We've had a lot of people come in and pull kids and do a reading, but we really need people that are highly trained in some of those skills for intervention.
Can I tag on? I'm sorry, thanks. I'll tag on to that. The librarian at Hills was doing the updates and stuff on the page, and that was an added responsibility for her, and it was difficult to keep up with, and it was hard to get current information on there because she had a job to do, and this was extra stuff. And I didn't hear the first part of what you said, but I want to tag on anyway. When we were talking about Pencil and schoolvolunteers.org and giving the general community a hub, someplace to go, there's a couple of things that we found about their some of the software that they use, and had a couple of ideas of what they could do. Like, it's a pretty static display, and there's only half a dozen schools or so using it. But if a school went on and had regular somebody in the school who was doing regular updates, or the information could get out there, and if the software allows you to create alerts. So you could say, you know what, I want to go into the MNPS system and I want to volunteer at Bailey, Dan Mills, and Inglewood. And I put a check mark in that box. And then I get an alert. Every time a new opportunity comes up there, I get an email, or I get a text message, or or whatever. And however that could work, there's got to be a way so that somebody doesn't, you're not requiring somebody, you're cutting that step out. I don't have to go back to the website every time, because the more steps there are, the less opportunities people are going to jump on, because they're just not going to do it.
Yeah, and that's how the Hands on Nashville site does function like that. And,
right.
And to your idea of Facebook groups, so I think we can kind of distill some of these ideas into an actual community plan. Every school, we need you to do this. This is and how we do it. And we figure out what's the easiest way, less manpower. We're not having to create positions or something crazy.
Yeah.
What's the way to get the community plan together?
Part of it, to Julie's point, is that potentially you could have a volunteer do the web,
Thinking
all that
even
stuff.
rather than
that would be awesome.
I know Jackson.
You're hired.
rather than focusing on like creating a council that tries to dictate instruction or curriculum, things that instead we're saying community and parents and involvement need not burden the school. Perhaps focusing on creating the community organization focused solely on community engagement and staffing, being the people who do that instead of trying to mix.
And I don't think I think it's a good idea to have an easy central place for people to sign up to volunteer. It's not a prerequisite. And so, how did Erica do it? She actually just went and knocked on the door after Patrick and said, I'd like to volunteer. And they said, okay, that's great. Can you commit to 2 days a week? And she said, sure, I can. And so that's, I think that it's pretty easy. And truth be told, she's supposed to pass a background check. And they were like, well, this week we can sort of get you in there. And, the principals, I think, are all willing to work with volunteers that are coming in. I think what we need is we need to get that message out. That we do need people who can commit, every week, twice a week or something. Hopefully they become well-trained after doing it for a few weeks. But if we can get that message out there, we don't have to create barriers to entry. We just have to get the message out that these schools need our help. Schools need the community's help, not just at our own schools, but at the schools that need the help the most, which is the priority schools.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind that a lot of teachers they're not used to having help. They're not used to people being in the rooms. We had stories at Dan Mills from years ago, and I talked to a teacher who had been there for years, when we had parents who were knocking on doors and they were just hanging out in classrooms. What can I do? I'm just going to sit here until I find something to do. And she pulled me aside. This is my second year in, first grader, and she said, I know that the PTO is growing. You guys want to be involved, and there's a lot of stuff happening, but a lot of us were here during the famine. So feast and famine, and it goes in cycles. So you have to remember that there may be some apprehension on the sides of teachers, right. And also if you have some younger teachers, they may not just know how to do it.
Right.
Now I've got a parent coming in here. Now I'm already stressed out because I got 20 kids, and now I got a parent looking over my shoulder. So there's a lot of things to look at, and that's why I said that so much of this is relational. And if you go and knock on that door and say, hey, I'm here to help, and then you spend. And you keep coming back, even though it's a little awkward the first couple of times, eventually you develop that relationship. And it's that relationship that's going to make it happen.
Right.
But that stuff takes time.
Thanks, everybody. I want to respect everyone's time. We will have Chris back at the next meeting. We're going to go back. He's going to present, as we discussed before, the ideas of potential pathways, and we'll get back to that discussion.
Can I just, we talked about like a map based on census income. And I think that I wasn't sure. It sounded like that was going to happen, but that hasn't been received. Is that on the list of something that's Yeah, definitely. But I think it's informative for that kind of discussion.
We'll get that for next time then. Awesome. Okay. And then we're going to try to do February 4th and 18th. And my goal is we kind of come up with our recommendations, and the 18th would probably be our last meeting, and take that to the community at large. And hopefully we have recommendations for the district and the school board. That's the idea. So
is the 29th off the...
No, we're meeting January 28th. That's where Chris will be back, and then in February, 2 more meetings, basically, was kind of the goal, just so there's an end in sight. We'll see what happens beyond that. But thanks again, Dr. Register, MNPS staff, Elisa Kim for being here. 28th, yeah. Last Wednesday in January, and like I said, Chris will be back, and we'll have an agenda and be ready to go. Thanks.